I'm going to share. Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. We'll give everyone a couple minutes to jump on. Hope the week is treating you well. Halfway through, see what the weekend brings. Hope it's good weather. I'm ready for some sunshine, less clouds. That's for sure. And I'm down here in the south, so I shouldn't be complaining at all, but spoiled. So let's see who's chat. Happy Wednesday, David. Nice to see you. All right, y'all. So we are lucky enough to have Diane Asher back today. So I know she's got a lot to talk about, obviously, when we're in the second installment. So I'm going to go ahead and get us rocking here. Let me get my technology on board. I think we solved most of the early steps. So first of all, welcome. For those of you that are new to the 2024 professional webinar series hosted by Harmony Foundation. My name is Christy Weeks, and I am your brand and digital media manager. So my cat just walked across the screen. So today's presentation, he's my office mate. Today's presentation is working below the surface. And this is understanding how to use the tool of motivational interviewing to decrease ambivalence and increase growth in addiction treatment. And since we might have some new people here, I'm going to talk a little bit about Harmony in case you don't know. We are located in Estes Park, Colorado on 43 acres. It's a beautiful campus near the Rocky Mountain National Park, and we have been treating addiction for over 54 years. We'll be celebrating, I think, our 55th anniversary this fall, so looking forward to that. We are an abstinence-based treatment program. Approximately 70 residential beds. We have full medical detox, a virtual IOP program, family support and education, and alumni support services. So in the treatment programs, we focus on gender-specific treatment, and it's a very individualized plan, evidence-based 12-step program with a lifetime of support for our alumni and family members. We do offer peer support meetings, family group meetings, just to give everybody in the entire unit full support as much as we possibly can. So if you want to learn more about Harmony, please visit our website, harmonyfoundationinc.com, or if you want to talk to a live person, you can call our number 970-586-4491 and speak to an admissions specialist. That's a hard word on Wednesdays, to get any of your questions answered. So a few things you should know: this webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on our website by end of day on Friday. If you choose, you can go back and visit any of our other prior webinars, including Diane's first installment of this series, which is on there, so you can get all caught up and ready for the third installment, which happens next month. We do offer one CEU for this presentation, and it will be emailed to you by the end of day on Friday. Important fact, we do track the amount of time you are in the webinar, so you have to be involved for at least 45 minutes in order to receive the CEU. If by chance you need to jump off before then and need a certificate of attendance, I'm happy to provide that. You can just shoot me an email and I will help you out. So we do have a survey attached to this webinar. We would love for you to fill it out. It helps guide our next topics, our future topics, so to speak. You are not required to do the survey, but we do appreciate it. So if you don't see the survey link by the end of the webinar, it will be in your CEU email. All right, here we go. So as I mentioned, we are lucky to have Diane Asher, one of our lead counselors, back. Her entire bio is here. It's also on the website if you choose to learn more about her. But I don't want to hold up this whole thing anymore with my chatting. If you have questions about anything during the webinar, please put them in the chat box. We are happy to answer them. We will pause and let Diane have a chance to answer those. We'd love to hear from you guys. So Diane, I think this is all you.
Okay. Let me share my screen.
Hi, Megan. I see you in there.
All right. Can you all see my PowerPoint?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. If you were with us last time, thank you so much for coming back. If this is your first time, that is completely fine. I will highlight a little bit of what we covered last month. And this is going to be a 3-part series. So I want to thank Christy very much for inviting me back. So we will build from the first session to this session, and then from this session on to the third session, and I'll explain more about that as we go. So let's get to it. The objectives for today are just to learn more about the core skills of motivational interviewing. We will spend more time on differentiating between complex and simple reflections, affirmations. And so today the plan is to really give you a sense of what those core skills are. In our next session in May, which will be May 22nd, I believe, is that correct, Christy? We will.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Yeah, so it's a week earlier. So in our next session, what I'm going to do, and I'll explain more as we go forward, how to integrate the skills into the overall practice of motivational interviewing. So please, I can't see you. If you have questions, put them in the chat. Christy will let me know. I work best from seeing how you guys are doing. If you have things that aren't working or that aren't making sense, please let me know. I'm going to ask you to type things into the chat as part of a participation throughout the session. So this hour is yours. So let's start with, for those of you who were here last time, or people that are brand new to this, we want to talk about all the aspects of motivational interviewing. And so the first layer, if you will, or the first foundation of motivational interviewing is what we call the spirit of MI. And so I thought, what a better way to introduce what MI is than have the founders, Dr. Stephen Rolnick and Dr. Bill Miller, explain it. Dr. Teresa Moyers is also in this, and she is the third person of MI and has been doing this alongside the Miller and Rolnick from close to the beginning. So without further ado,
I saved hundreds with Liberty Mutual.
all...
Liberty, liberty, liberty. Liberty.
What is motivational interviewing?
We can't see it, we can hear it. Is that correct?
About change.
And
it's a particular way about having a conversation about change.
Can you see it now?
That listens
No,
to
ma'am.
and calls.
But we can hear it loud and clear.
All right. Oh, I have to switch this.
What is motivational interviewing? I mean, it's a way of having a conversation about change. And it's a particular way about having a conversation about change.
Can you see it now?
That listens
No, ma'am.
to and
We'll
calls
just listen
forth the
to it.
person's own ideas.
Sounds good.
About whether to do that and why to do it.
One of the fastest ways that you can burn out as a therapist is being convinced that your job is to tell people to change when they're convinced not to. That's a recipe for burnout. And that is, in motivational interviewing, explicitly what you are not doing.
Why don't people change is one hell of a question. It's perhaps a useful question, but there's no single simple answer to it.
One of the things that Steve Rolnick helped me to realize was how normal ambivalence is when you're looking at a change. And to simultaneously want and not want something is perfectly normal.
Okay, that was a very quick snippet from the founders and developers of motivational interviewing. Any reaction to that? Motivation. Oh,
I'm watching the chat box for you.
okay.
I'll let you know, Diane. Go ahead.
Okay. So motivational interviewing is a particular way of talking with people about the idea of change and their ability to grow and strengthen their commitment to change. So it's normal to have ambivalence.
So
right?
here's a few reactions. Are you ready?
Yep.
So it's Suzanne says it's hard to feel like you are working harder than your client to help them change. Darby says, I agree about the burnout, putting the ball in the patient's court helps. And Sarah says that she has found MI to be incredibly useful.
Yay. So you've probably often heard the sentence, don't work harder than the client, right? And so that's when I start to feel that, I know that I'm working ahead of the client. So when I start to feel that way, and we'll talk more about this later, it is my cue to work differently with that person. And so, yeah, I agree. When I was trying to convince people to change, it was a lot of burnout. And so motivational interviewing, I agree, Sarah, is very, very useful. So we want to start with this sense of why we're doing what we're doing. Again, motivational interviewing is much more than a set of techniques, right? It's about that way of being with people. The first principle or of the spirit of MI is that partnership. I am here to understand you and help you find that internal reason for change. That's not something I can impose on you. So it's really, really explicitly acknowledging that people are the expert on their own lives. The second principle is acceptance. And last time I shared that Bill Miller comes from a background of unconditional positive regard, much like Carl Rogers. The difference is in motivational interviewing, we do want people to feel accepted. We absolutely want to start with where they're at. The difference between Rogerian therapy and motivational interviewing is we want to use that unconditional positive regard, not use it, but acknowledge it to help people move in a direction. So we are providing direction. The third part is compassion. And that's the reason I'm in this field, because I really deeply want to see people move on from suffering. And at the heart of it, people with addiction disorders, there is a lot of suffering. So my intention is to help people move in a direction that increases their well-being. And finally, empowerment. This is really key. So I am looking internally within someone to help them find those skills, those strengths that we have in us, and bring that out. So it's not uncommon at all for people to come into treatment and feel horrible about themselves. I can't do anything right, or I've done all this, I've made up all these, I screwed up all this time. And so from a MI lens, I want to start to focus on what they're doing well. Yeah, you've had a rough time of it, and you're not really happy with all the things that have occurred, or that the wave that you've left behind from your drug use. And at the same time, it takes a lot of courage to ask for help. Most people don't get there. What gave you the courage to ask for help? So that's where that empowerment is. It's not something that I impose on somebody, but rather it is drawing it out from them. So I'm going to move on more quickly to talk about, and this is what the bulk of our next session will be, about the 4 tasks of motivational interviewing. So today I'm going to go over the skills of MI, and then in the 3rd session we'll come back and talk about how to use them differently within whatever stage or task you're in with the client, if that makes sense. So I will use specific reflections, affirmations when I'm engaging with somebody. When I am in focusing, it will be another different set. And these aren't prescriptive, it's based on where the client is at. So first, I just want to connect with that person. Can I go with you on this journey? The second one is the focusing process. I want to be crystal clear that I understand what your goal is. I work in a residential treatment facility. It is common knowledge that the goal is to help somebody stop drinking or drugging. But what motivates them and what's behind that is different for every single person. So I want to look at that. And then the big phase is evoking reasons for change. So the question really isn't, how do I quit drinking or drugging? The question is, why? The stronger that why is that's coming internally from them, the better chance they are of making lasting changes. And finally, planning. So this gets a little more directive on my end, but I still want to do that in a way that supports their autonomy. So this is what we'll be covering in depth next time. I will give you some tools to work with in each one of these stages so that you can start to have some direction. All right, so today then, our focus is really on what are those skills. And I don't know if I said this last time, but when I first started teaching MI, I was Like, well, I can't teach people how to do this. This is just common sense. This is what you learn in Psych 101. The longer I've practiced, it's like an onion. It just becomes more and more nuanced with every layer. So I'll try to get at some of that today. Please feel free to stop me if you have questions. But that is going to be the remainder of our time today. So the first skill in motivational interviewing is open-ended questions. So from an MI lens, we get the most information about a client's motivation, their desires, from using good reflections. Because I'm simply being a mirror to what they're saying. The second way to get the most information is through the use of open-ended questions. So they're just open-ended questions are an invitation to give the person room to decide how they want to respond. I use closed-ended questions when I'm doing work with MI, but that's where I am asking for a specific point of information. So I think, Christy, we can send out the importance and confidence ruler again, but that's an example in motivational interviewing where I am specifically wanting an answer. So I'm going to show you guys some questions, and in the chat, type in if the question, you can just put O for opened or C for closed. So the question, how much do you drink? Is that open or closed? Okay. So it is a closed-ended question. The reason it's closed is because a person, and this is an easy trap to fall into, when I ask somebody, if I were to ask somebody, how much do you drink? And they say, well, I just drink 2 drinks a day. I can't really go anywhere with that. You know, I can't say, do you mean 2 drinks or 2 drinks? Right? When they can give me a one-word answer, that generally means that it's a closed-ended question. Okay. The second question, what are your reasons for change? Open or closed? Yep, it's an open-ended question. I'm inviting the person to tell me why they need to change or why they want to change. There could be a whole range of answers that they give me. So let's try another one. Do you think we are moving in the right direction? Open or closed? Yep, you guys are getting in the hang of it. So yeah, clearly when I ask, do you, the person could say yes, no, and then we're done. We'll do a couple more. How comfortable are you talking with me? So it's kind of a mixed bag here. So I would say this is a closed-ended question. So my litmus test for myself, understanding the difference between closed and open, is if I can ask myself that question and I can answer with one word, then that becomes a closed-ended question. So this one's a little more subtle, but when you say, how comfortable are you talking to me? They can say, I'm not, I am, very. Now, most people would elaborate more, but you're starting to get the gist. All right. Let's do the last one. And this is one of my favorite questions. We'll skip the other one. Tell me how your family celebrates the holidays. Open or close? Yep. This is clearly an open-ended question, and it's a good way to get someone to talking about their drinking or drug use without overtly asking them. So I'm always surprised at how many families end up inviting the police to their family holidays functions, because there is so much drinking and whatever that they get in fights and the police are called. So if I just ask somebody, describe a typical holiday to me, I kind of find out what the family's views of drinking and drug use are. So I hope that makes sense. Now, again, closed-ended questions are not bad, open aren't good. We're just gathering different types of information. Any questions about that? So think of open-ended questions this way. These are some examples. What's the best thing that can happen if you decide to make this change? What's the best thing? Or just tell me what life looks like in a year if you haven't picked up any drugs. I can also ask the opposite. What's the worst thing that could happen if you continue to drink? So one of the things I'll do is not often, depending on the client, have them write a letter from their children as if the children were adults. So you have a 5-year-old son, write a letter from him to you as an adult, telling you what life is like to have a father who is fully engaged and sober. And then I ask them to write a letter from their son, future son, to themselves about what is life like if you continue to use. And I've had grown men break down in tears. It is so powerful. So I'm not in the position of telling him, well, you know, if you keep drinking and drugging, you're not going to be in your child's life. I'm able to have them figure that out and then verbalize that. And it's extremely powerful. So the other default of mine is to ask, tell me about. Now, if I ask somebody, tell me about your drinking, and they come back and say, well, I don't, that's one thing. But it is much more inviting to ask it that way versus saying, how much do you drink? So those are pretty self-explanatory. Another way is to ask what other people's loved ones are saying about their drug use, their drinking, their eating, whatever, gambling. All right. So we're going to move on because we're going to spend more time with reflections. The second skill, if you will, of motivational interviewing are affirmations. There are simple affirmations and complex affirmations. And so affirmations are statements and gestures that acknowledge a person's strengths and abilities. They also help to build self-confidence and self-efficacy. So giving an affirmation, you want it to be specific. So it took a lot of courage for you to come here. How did you do that? So one, I'm affirming, this is for me how I get a deeper affirmation. One, I'm affirming that they took a courageous step to come to treatment. And then by asking a follow-up question, what gave you the courage to do that? They are then verbalizing, hearing themselves say, well, yeah, maybe that was a little hard. So I want it to be specific. The second one, and this is nuanced. This is focusing the affirmation on something that you see, a positive quality you see in them. So you really worked hard in group today versus me saying, I really like the way you did this. Now, neither one of them is wrong, and I use both. However, when I start to say what I think is right, what I acknowledge, there can be a subtle shift in the client to start to want to do things to please us, right? So if I like when you do this and I like when you do that, then they might do those things more. Does that make sense to folks? That's a tricky one. Another complex affirmation is when you start getting at underlying strengths. So this is stuff that people don't feel like, maybe they don't even identify it. So an example could be that you're talking with someone and saying, well, I can't do this. I've never been sober. Nobody in my family's sober. There's no way this can happen. And I'll come back with a reflection and then an affirmation. So, yeah, this is really difficult for you. And at the same time, you're taking a step forward. I know you haven't been sober before, but you were the first person in your family to graduate from high school. How did you do that? So I get them to look at a different area of their life where they really struggled, but they persevered. And I'm wondering if some of those same strengths that you had to get you through high school, you can use here. So I want to acknowledge or affirm efforts they're making and positive intentions. So not everyone's step forward is a success, but I want to acknowledge their intentions. So affirmations, a simple affirmation is commenting on something specific. You really understand yourself well. You did this, okay? You offered help to another client. I really appreciate that. You know, I know this topic was difficult, and yet you jumped right in. You knew you needed help, and you asked for that. Again, to strengthen it, go back to what gave you the courage to overcome your fear of asking for help. I get more change talk. The more change talk I get from somebody, the more it reinforces for them reasons to change. Now, complex reflections are focusing more on enduring strengths that somebody has, or that qualities in that person. So I've had somebody who has spent a lot of time in prison, and that person feels like they haven't done anything right in their life. And yet I see that person helping a lot of other people. And so with that individual, I say a lot of things like, you haven't had an easy go of it in life, and yet you are still focused on being helpful to others. That is really admirable. So, like, you're willing to do whatever it takes to finish a project. You're resilient. You encourage others when they're down. What you did took real change. Oftentimes, people, as you know, who are first getting clean and sober, don't feel good about themselves. They're not able to see this, or they've discounted it because they're so focused on the negative. So the more I can bring out that they do have skills, they do have abilities, it helps move the change process along. So that's open-ended questions and affirmations. So tell me in the chat if we talked last time about the fixing reflex. So when I see something not quite right, my instinct is to jump in and fix it. So an example would be when somebody tells me, I can't do this. I just don't know what to do. And I come back and say, there, you can do it. I believe in you. I'm actually undermining their self-confidence because I'm not hearing what they said. And I'm trying to fix their feeling of inadequacy by making a cheerleading statement. So put in the chat whether you think this is an affirmation or cheerleading. You are doing so well. Yep, cheerleading. It's not specific. Okay, let's try this one. You worked really hard to get here today. Yep, affirmation. You're a rock star with your sobriety. Somebody wrote cheerleading with a leg kick. Exactly. All right, and the last one, you spoke up in group even if it was difficult, or even though it was difficult. Yeah, so you guys get this, so we'll move on. So that's open-ended questions, affirmations, and now we're going to move on to reflections. And this is the heart and soul of motivational interviewing. It's the skill of really actively listening. It's when I try to understand what somebody's subjective experience is. So Bill Miller will talk about work that was done in the 1970s by Thomas Gordon. And it was around the whole idea of effective parenting. And so he outlined what happens in the process of communication. So the first one is, what does the speaker mean? And think about it this way. How many times have you told somebody that you're fine, everything's good, even when that's not what you mean? So the process of communication works like this. It's an internal thought or an internal need that the person wants to communicate. So then they use words to say what they mean. As a listener, you then hear what they say, but then you have to interpret. What did they mean? And then I'm going to feed that back to them. So because we don't always say what we mean, sometimes intentionally and other times not so much. So it's a statement. Think about it as you're offering a mirror to the person who's just said something. And that mirror can be explicit or implicit. So the explicit ones are really focusing on what we call simple reflection. When I'm working with people with schizophrenia or who have other cognitive delays or not delays, but interruptions, if I'm working with somebody who has pretty far developed alcoholism, there are some cognitive changes. So with those folks, I want to use simple reflections. I also want to use this if somebody is really manic. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So there, I'm basically rephrasing what somebody said to me or paraphrasing what they've said. Now, if I'm working with a teenager or somebody who is agitated, it's not really helpful to do that, right? I don't know about you, but I've had the experience of paraphrasing something a teenager said to me, and they come back with, I just told you that. So those are simple ones, but there's a place for them. Much of the work of motivational interviewing comes down to this idea of complex reflections. And this is where you can, and with simple reflections, with any of the skills, this is how it's a little different than Rogerian therapy, because I am adding direction, right? I want my clients to move in the direction of health and well-being. So a complex reflection really is about working below the surface. There are a lot of different tools I can use in the form of reflections to help people expand their change time. So in MI, I want to constantly do things where I'm asking the client implicitly to tell me what are those reasons that you want to change, right? If I keep asking things like, why is it so hard? Sometimes that might be a place for that, but that can reflect, they can then start talking about reasons not to change. So let's start looking at some of these. My favorite one is what we call a double-sided reflection. On one hand, you don't know if you can stop using. It feels really overwhelming. And at the same time, you desperately want to see your grandchildren grown up. How do those, tell me more about what it's like to see your grandchildren, right? So here it's nuanced. So I want to lay out, I simply am laying out both sides of their ambivalence. On one hand, you feel this way, and at the same time, you feel this way. I use the word and instead of but because it is a more neutral term. When I use the word but, it implies some level of judgment. So on one hand, you don't want to change, and on the other hand, you do. Tell me about what makes that important. So I always start with the sustain side, why you don't want to change, and I end with the change side, because then it's really natural for me to say, well, tell me more about why that's so important that you see those grandchildren, or that you get to walk your child down the aisle, right? So again, I am directionally moving them by the type of reflection I'm using. Another one is an amplified reflection. So I might overstate or understate somebody's reason for change. So I'm here because my husband made me come, right? They don't want to be here. They don't see a problem. And so if I say, and that's the only reason that you want to be here, well, I got da da da. Or I could understate that. I'm here because my husband made me come. Yeah, there's absolutely no reason for you to be here today. So I can get some movement that way. Another one is shifting the focus. So this is helpful when somebody starts getting agitated. You don't understand. You're not in recovery. You never had a problem. So I'm going to acknowledge that. Yeah. It's hard to imagine how I can possibly understand. So I'm shifting the focus from them focusing on whether I get it to their struggle with me understanding it. Another type, we could do this all day, but another type is reflecting the client's autonomy. This gives them that sense of ownership. It goes back to the spirit of partnership. I really want to stop smoking weed, but I'm not ready yet. So the counselor says, you'll stop when you're ready, right? That's giving them control. They follow it up with, stopping is really important to you. So there's lots of different, I will send a handout that gives some of these examples as well as other ones. But this is what I mean by when we're working below the surface. We're expressing unstated meaning or unstated feeling. Sometimes I can use a metaphor. I can't take too much more of the anxiety. Yeah, you feel like your head's going to explode. An invitation to talk more. I might try reframing this. And then finally, there's also reflecting unspoken feeling. So I really don't want to be here today, and I can reflect, yeah, being here right now is really scary. Tell me about that. So they haven't said they're scared, but they've implicitly hinted at that, right? So if I can put myself in their shoes and understand where they're coming from, it gives me room to maneuver. So because of the type of workshop we're doing, we don't really have a lot of ability to practice. I will give you a short snippet where you can see this in practice. Next time, we will really focus on how to use reflections, open-ended questions, affirmations, and summaries to activate behavioral change. Okay, so that will be the work we're going to do next time. The last skill here is summaries. Bill Miller will say it's like you're picking a bouquet of flowers. So I use reflections at the end of a session. I use it if I'm transitioning from one part of a session to another part. And he said that you're not reflecting back everything the person said. You are focusing on specific things that are geared towards change. So you're linking two things together. You're focusing on the things that they've said that are change-oriented. You're collecting that information and feeding it back to them. So they are summaries, but they're a specific type of summary, if that makes sense. So I want to give you just a very quick 2-minute chance to hear what reflection or good MI practice is. So I am going to switch my screen and get out of this. And hopefully this time you will be able to see the video. We'll do it this way. Do you guys all see Google up there now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I want to leave a couple minutes at the end for you to be able to ask questions.
To be free and flexible and creative was really essential to what I wanted to make, and I didn't find a platform that did that.
Well, Jim, I'm glad you're here. I'm kind of surprised to see you're coming back today.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I sat out in the front here for about an hour before I come in, and I was about that close to just cranking that pickup up and heading back home. I'll let you know, just like I told Rich, I'm not real happy about being here. I hope you understand that.
I'm hearing you loud and clear that being here is not something that's really a high priority for you.
And I'm looking at you and you got blonde hair. You know, I haven't had a lot of luck with blonde hair the last couple of weeks.
Is that right? Well, tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I got assigned a probation officer, and she's a blonde-headed gal. Mm-hmm. And I think she's out to just destroy me totally. You know, she's talking about me getting a lot of jail time and this big fine and everything that she's going to do if I don't do certain things. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of think maybe you're going to do the same thing to me.
So it seems to you like I might try to push you around and make you do a whole bunch of things you don't want to do.
Yeah, and you know, I'm about up to here with this kind of stuff. I hope you know that. Probably isn't your fault, but that's just kind of the way things been going.
You're
know?
Pretty fed up.
Yeah, my daughter, you know, she won't let me see the kids.
Your grandchildren. What's that about?
Well, she'll let me see them, but she won't let me take them anywhere anymore.
Really?
And that really has me upset, you know. She's afraid that I'll take him, hurt him, drive around drinking and driving, things like that. And I never have hurt one of them kids.
So she's afraid that if you take the children with you, that you'll be drinking and then you might hurt them or get in an accident.
Even when I say that I wouldn't drink, she still don't trust me now. And that's really got me upset, really got me ticked off.
So the fact that your daughter won't even take your word for the fact that you won't drink kind of bites at you a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And she said, you know, well, you need help. Well, you know, when she needed help, I damn sure didn't.
Okay, so that's a really brief snippet. We can spend more time on that in our next visit together. I want to just ask a couple, are there questions before we head out? You can always send them to me, send them to Christy. The last thing is I'm going to give you guys a little homework between now and our next session. The best way to learn how to do good, deep reflections is by practice. So spend 2 minutes every day, whether it's with a client, your spouse, try not to ask questions and simply focus on reflections. So it's like you're building that muscle so it just becomes more natural. So in that video, we got to see her ask questions, but do a whole lot of reflections. So in our next time together in May, we're going to put this all together, and I'm going to give you specific tools for each task. I'm just so happy that you're here and that you're interested in MI. So that's all I have for today.
Right on, Diane. Thank you so much. There goes the chat box. Everybody's thanking you. Another great presentation. Definitely something that I hadn't thought about. You know, I come from a position where I'm not in, you know, client one-on-one. So learned a lot. Appreciate that. Appreciate everybody who took the time to join us today. Quick reminders real quick. If you don't see an email from me by end of day Friday, check your junk mail first. A lot of my emails go there. This webinar will be available on our website by end of day Friday, should you choose to revisit it. And we hope you join us on May 22nd. Keep your eyes open. Those details for registration will be coming your way. And again, fill out that survey. Let us know how you feel about the series of presentations that we're giving a shot. Could be something we do more of, or if it's something that is not working well for y'all, which that's not the gist I'm getting. We'd love to know. And again, always give us the topics that you would love to hear about. Enjoy the rest of your month. Everybody take care. See you in May. Thanks, Diane.
Bye.